My name is Romeo. I'm the Citizen Science Coordinator for the Key Biscayne Community Foundation. As most of you know, we have a lecture series throughout the school year every month, usually the third Thursday. This month it's a little too close to Christmas, so we bumped it up a week. This is going to be our last lecture for the year. We'll start up again in January on the third Thursday. Today we have with us Dr. Rafael Araujo. He is a mangrove expert and a professor at University of Miami. Before I hand it off to him, I just want to remind everybody, if you want to be alerted to our future events and lectures, there's a sign-up sheet in the back. Just give me your email address. And any Key Challenge students here, there's a sign-up sheet for you also. Make sure you sign in so that I know that you were here. And with that, I will hand it off to Rafa. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you, Romeo, for the invitation, and thank you all for being here. It's Thursday, and it's around Christmas, so I really didn't expect anyone to show up. So I'm delighted that you guys are so interested in mangrove ecosystems, and it's truly a pleasure just to engage with the community and to hopefully teach them something that they don't know about mangroves. They are so essential for us in South Florida, so it's really a treat for me just to be doing this. I'm going to provide an outline of what the talk is going to be like. And while I was preparing it, my concern was, what does a person need to know about mangroves? Like, what do I want you guys to go home, the knowledge that I want you to go home with? So everything is kind of like geared towards that. This is what I want you to know about mangroves in case that you didn't know, and it's that you know, well, it's a good refresher. And then I'm going to divide the talk into 4 themes. The first question, and this one is a very difficult question that most people, including scientists, don't know how to answer. And that question is, what is a mangrove? So that's the first thing that I want to talk about. So in general, mangrove refers to a collection of mostly trees, but there are also ferns and at least one species of palm that are considered mangroves. And worldwide, we have about 60 to 70 species, and they are grouped into 16 botanical families. So it is a very large collection of mostly trees again, and there is great variety. The criteria to describe what is a mangrove was provided by Bruce Tomlinson in the 1980s, and he was out of Cambridge University, and he sort of provided the guidelines to help us discern what is a mangrove and what is not a mangrove. So the first thing that a mangrove does is that every species plays a major role in the mangrove community and has the ability to form pure stands. When I talk about pure stand, is basically when you walk into a forest and there is only one species of plant. So that is a pure stand. So for instance, for Florida, the red mangrove is an important part of the mangrove community in Florida, and in many places you walk through a mangrove ecosystem and you will only find red mangroves. Is that clear? Okay, awesome. So that is the first characteristic. And some examples of different mangrove forests. Here, see how this works? Okay, here and here we have the predominance of red mangroves, and we can identify those by the characteristic root structure. And here we have another species of mangrove that is not present in Florida, but is very similar to our black mangrove. And you see that the roots here are characterized by showing those pencil-like projections called pneumatophores. So these are just some examples of mangrove forests. The top one is in Florida, this one is in Australia, and this one is in the Dominican Republic. So we have them all over the world. Okay, so the second characteristic of what constitutes a mangrove is that these plants must have some type of specialization, usually in the morphology, to adapt to a particular habitat. And that habitat is the intersection between land and sea. So they are at the coast, not completely marine, but also not completely terrestrial. They are in between. So some of those specializations, the ones that at least we can see very, very clearly, are related to the root. And most mangroves have very specialized root structures. Here is another species that, again, we don't have in Florida, and this is mostly from Malaysia and Australia, of a mangrove called Zonation alba. And you see that the roots are incredibly, incredibly specialized, and they have all these different structures that help the mangrove to cope with salt and also to live in environments that are typically waterlogged. They are influenced by the tides. And you don't see this in many plants, but you see them in all mangrove plants. Another one is that in addition to the morphology, there is gotta be some sort of physiological specialization that will allow those plants to grow in saline environments. If you have house plants and you wanna kill them like really, really quick, throw some salt on them, okay? But mangroves are capable to withstand salinity, sometimes very, very, very high salinities. And here we see that there are many specializations, but one of them is that many mangrove plants have the capacity to excrete salt. So they drink salt water, and later, through the leaves, these crystals form with the excretion of the extra salt. In some other species, what they do is that they filter the water at the root level. So they are not really drinking salt water, they are drinking fresh water. So every species is different, but these are among the most striking adaptations that allow mangroves to inhabit saline habitats. And this is characteristic of the black mangrove.
Black.
Yeah, black. Another thing, I'm not gonna spend too much time on this, but if you guys are more or less familiar with how living things are classified, for mangroves, there's gotta be what we call taxonomic isolation from terrestrial relatives. For instance, there is a species of mangroves that is in the same family to the garden rose, but the mangrove and the rose, although they belong to the same family, are separated by different clays and genera, etc., etc. So, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but it is important for us to know what is and what is not a mangrove. Another one, and this one is key, is that a mangrove tree only inhabits a mangrove ecosystem. It's a tautology of sorts, and that is called the fidelity to the mangrove environment. In other words, when you're driving to Key Biscayne on the sides of the Rickenbacker Causeway, you will see Australian pines, right? But those are not mangroves. They occupy an environment that is, or can be also occupied by a mangrove. But why is not an Australian pine a mangrove? Because the Australian pine, we can see right at the shore, but also we can see those pines inland in completely different ecosystems that have nothing to do with the ocean. A red mangrove will only see, in natural conditions, of course, in a mangrove ecosystem. So that's what we call fidelity to the mangrove environment. So that's my intro. Now you guys know what is a mangrove. You can describe, the different properties that these plants must possess. Now, my first thing that I'm going to introduce is that mangroves are, again, a group of diverse plants, very taxonomically diverse, that are all adapted to live in the intertidal zone. Okay, so where do we find them? They are distributed around the world, mostly between 30 degrees north and 30 degrees south. So they are tropical and subtropical. For the most part, just to be safe, imagine the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. That tropical band, that's where mangroves are distributed. And this distribution, of course, suggests that mangroves don't like cold weather. They are kind of like limited by temperature, like us in Florida. We don't like a lot of cold. We prefer warm. So, you know, mangroves are a little bit like South Florida residents. Many species, actually most species, are intolerant to frost. And very few can survive temperatures that are lower than 5 degrees Celsius. So about 36, 37 degrees Fahrenheit. And although the adult tree might survive very low temperatures, the seedlings are incredibly vulnerable and they die right away. So that is why we believe that the distribution is mostly controlled by temperature. So here we have our map, and you see that the distribution, you know, more or less follows between the Tropic of Cancer, and then we have here the Tropic of Capricorn, and this is the equator. So they are mostly located in the tropical band and in and around the subtropics. So we don't see mangroves, say, in New York or the Mediterranean or northern Japan or in Tierra del Fuego because it's just too cold during the winter for mangroves to be able to survive. Now, there's some interesting patches in this map. And for instance, right here, we see that this is well within the tropical areas, but we don't have mangroves. Can anybody take a guess as to why that might be the case?
Current.
Current, in what sense?
Too much movement, they can't go into the ground.
Okay, yes.
The Pacific is a colder ocean.
It's a colder ocean. We have an incredibly cold current here, called the Peru or the Humboldt current. And also, this area is very dry. So it's a combination of dry, and it is actually very, very, very cold. So that is why we don't have here. So when we have deserts, typically we don't have mangroves. Although, you know, in some arid regions, we may have some patchy distributions of mangroves. For the most part, if it's desertic and cold, we're not going to have them. So, right. Here, another thing that is interesting is that if we talk about the distribution, the mangrove distribution nicely coincides with the distribution of two other super important marine ecosystems. Coral reefs right here, and you see that they are mostly also tropical and subtropical. Then this is the mangrove distribution, and this is the seagrass distribution. And another thing that is common to mangroves, coral reefs, and seagrasses is that most of the species are concentrated in what we call the coral triangle. And that is the area between the Philippines and Borneo, Peninsular Malaysia, Northern Australia, Vietnam. Most of the diversity is concentrated here. The same thing happens with corals, and the same thing happens with seagrasses. As we travel away from those areas, the number of species begins to diminish. And when we get to the New World, we see that we have fewer species when we compare to the number of species in the Indo-Pacific. So here we have about 12, and here we have 60 to 70 species according to location. So again, nice correspondence between coral reefs, mangroves, and seagrasses. Most of my lecture is going to cover mangroves on a global scale. It's important that you guys understand a little bit of what's going on in Florida. So how many species do we have in Florida? So basically we have 3 true mangrove species. When I say a true mangrove, all those species fulfill all the requirements that I described in my introduction. And those are very easy to remember: the red mangrove, Chrysophora mangle, the black mangrove, Avicennia herminans, and the white mangrove, Lagunculata racemosa. You guys are here in Key Biscayne. It's very easy just to take a walk and see the 3 species. So it's a wonderful location. In addition to that, we have 2 minor mangrove species, which are actually ferns. And there are 2 species of living ferns of the genus Acrostico. One is Aureum, the most common, and Danifolium, which is not so common, but it's quite common in the Everglades and Key. So most people don't know that these ferns are also mangrove species, and as a side note, they are not protected as the other mangroves are. So these 3 are protected by law, by the Mangrove Treatment and Regulation Act, but the 2 species of ferns are not protected by the regulation. Okay, and then we have a species that most people think is a mangrove, but in reality it is not. And that is the buttonwood, Conocarpus. And there are 2 varieties, Sericeus, which is very common in ornamental plants. Many of you will probably have those plants at home. And then Erectus, which is also quite common in horticulture. So those 2 are not mangroves, but many people consider them mangroves. So to me, it's an important associate. They like to be with the mangroves, but they are not really mangroves. Okay, so here, this is the red mangrove. Again, super easy to identify. Just look at the roots. Those are called prop roots. The bark is what gives the species the name. If you peel it, it will reveal a reddish tint. Sometimes it can be quite red, quite striking. Here is orange, but it can be quite red. Then you have the wonderful propagules. Those are kind of like the seeds of the plant. Very small flowers that are kind of like whitish or yellowish in color. And then the leaves are elliptical. If you look at them from the top, they are arranged in an elliptical fashion. Very easy to identify, and all of you will have no problem whatsoever identifying a red mangrove. Okay, then we have the black, and the most striking characteristic about the blacks is the presence of the pneumatophores. And these are projections of the roots, but they are not buried. They are actually, upright. They are exposed to the air, and they help the species breathe, taking air, because the soils are typically devoid of oxygen. Also, very small white flowers. The seedling, the seedling or the seed is not as big as that of the red mangrove. It's kind of like round and has like the shape of a bean. And then the leaves, these are the leaves that you will see excreting those salt crystals, are kind of like elliptical and elongated. And also the bark is quite characteristic. It's blackish, therefore the name of the species, and it tends to crack quite easily. So it's very easy to identify. The next one is the white mangrove, and this one again is super easy to identify. The leaves are kind of like round. We call them oblate right here, and they're also paired. Then at the tip, right here, what we call the petiole, right here, you will see these 2 glands, and the coloration of that structure is reddish.
So it's very, very easy to identify if you look closely at the leaves right here. And those two glands, people thought that they were used to excrete salt, but research has demonstrated that they are actually nectaries, that instead of excreting salt, they produce sugar. So it's a complete reversal of what we initially thought. And then the seeds are again very, very, very small. And quite easy to identify. Just so you know, most of the seeds you will see throughout the summer. If you take a walk now through the mangroves, Florida mangroves don't produce fruit or flowers for the most part during the winter. They wait for the summer when there is more light and the temperature is higher. And that's it. These are the three main species of mangroves. Then we have the associates. This is the buttonwood that I was telling you about. All of you have seen that. Many people, again, consider this a mangrove, but it's not. And then there's a whole bunch of other associates. The list can go into the thousands of plants that live very near a mangrove ecosystem, like, soil wars, glass wars, oxides, whatever, or your typical dune and other type of beach vegetation that is not really a mangrove. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about reproductive strategy, because this is one of the most unique things that separate mangroves from other plants. And most of the species actually disperse their seeds using water, and that is called hydropary. So it's dispersal of the seeds by water. Instead of using the wind or vectors or whatever, it's typically done by water. Therefore, water is very important for mangrove reproduction. And in this sense, tidal action is quite important. So the tide can take those propagules and bring them to other locations, and also they can act sort of like as a sorting mechanism to create zonation within a mangrove forest. Another thing that most people don't realize about mangroves is that they show vivipary. So you know how we as mammals, we tend to our young and you feed the young. Mangroves do exactly the same thing. So the seed germinates while it's still attached to the parent. Imagine that you have an avocado or a mango or whatever other type of plant. You get the seed, you plant the seed, and the tree grows, right? Mangroves do it differently. They actually germinate the seed while it's still attached to the plant. So they show vivipary. It's a little, the term is very similar, but a little different from viviparity, which is the term that we use for animals. For plants, we use vivipary, but the concept is the same. It means that they provide maternal care to the seed. And very, very few plants actually do that. And mangroves do, tend to the young through vivipary. So the seed, the actual seed, what you will identify as a seed for other plant, is actually the tip of the propagule. And the elongation is the germinated part. So all of this, you see, the plant has begun to grow, and the seed has been broken through the pericarp. So it means that this is a baby already, growing, but still attached to the mother tree. So, very, very few plants again do this, but most mangrove species are capable of doing that. So they provide maternal care to the young. The second thing is related to the different controls that help us to explain mangrove distribution. Climate, salinity, tidal fluctuation, sedimentation, and wave energy. So I'm going to go through those. Okay, so most mangrove ecosystems, like really gigantic mangrove forests, those that go on forever, tend to be associated or grow along the deltas of very large rivers. The Ganges in Bangladesh, the Fly River in Papua New Guinea, the Mekong in Vietnam, etc., etc. So these rivers, in combination with the salt that the ocean provides and the high temperatures of these tropical locations provides sort of like the ideal setting for mangrove ecosystems. Now, I have another question for you guys. There are two rivers which are the largest rivers in the world, the Amazon and the Congo, and they, for the most part, don't have mangroves. Why?
No salt water.
Salt.
Hmm?
Salt.
No salt.
Why there isn't any
So
salt?
much water.
There is too much water. The outflows are so gigantic that there is no salt water. Therefore, the vegetation is characterized by species that do not tolerate salt, like grasses, for instance. So there is no that mixing of fresh water with ocean water. So again, climate is an incredibly important controlling factor. You know about the freezing, and I touched upon aridity before. And when we have arid coasts like Peru, for instance, we don't have a lot of mangroves. So the greater development is along coasts that have either a lot of fresh water, but not too much, or a lot of rain, which can also be important. So even if you don't have a lot of rivers, but there is a lot of rain, then you have these gigantic mangrove forests that develop along the coast. And salinity, now this, most people don't know that, but salinity is not a requirement for growth. So now it appears that I'm contradicting myself, right? Because I'm saying that salt is necessary, but it's not required for growth. So this is what happens. So mangroves are what is called facultative halophytes. So they can deal with salt, but they can grow perfectly in environments that don't have salt. The problem is competition. So if there is an environment which is completely devoid of salt, many other plants will win the competition with mangroves. Mangroves grow very, very slowly. So, you know, other plants, grasses, you know, many other plants that are ferns, that are incredibly aggressive and fast growers will take over and will not permit the development of mangroves. So salt, although it's not required for growth, is sort of like a factor that helps to weed out, pun intended, competition. So, and we consider that an eliminating factor. In fact, there are no coastal counties in Florida, in northern Florida, that contain mangroves. So they are within lakes and lagoons, and probably there is saline intrusion underground that facilitates that growth. But not all mangroves are necessarily associated with the coast. So you know, if you go to northern Florida, you can see mangroves that are 50, 60 miles away from the coast. Okay, and tides are important. Again, it's not totally required, but it plays an indirect role in mangrove development. And tide brings, it excludes plants because it brings salinity. It also washes out a lot of toxins from the soil with the ebb and flow of the tides. So it oxygenates the area. So tide can be quite important. In fact, the most developed mangrove forests in the world are located in areas that have a very large tidal amplitude. Say the Pacific coast of Central and South America, where the tide can be 6 or 7 meters, as opposed to 25 centimeters, as it is in Florida. And so when the tide comes in, it goes inland for many miles, and all those areas are occupied by mangroves. And sediments also are super important in areas that have a lot of depositional sedimentation processes also tend to be colonized by mangroves. So it's just more area to grow and reproduce. And something that is very unique to mangroves is that if you put all those factors together, especially the tidal influence and the different size of the property flows, you end up with a zonation pattern that is quite striking in certain parts of the world, and Florida is one of them. So what happens? So there is a lot of spatial variation in our ecosystem. So the species compete with other species, but also among themselves. And then for mangroves, the tide acts as a controlling factor that produces zonation. And this zonation sometimes is depicted as very, very rigid, that it doesn't change. But if you travel to many places around the world, you can see that many patterns exist as a response of the interaction between the tide and the reproductive strategies of the mangroves. So for Florida and the Caribbean, the zonation is the following. At the seaward, you have the red mangrove. If you walk a little bit inland, you have the black mangrove, and then at the end of the forest, you tend to have the white mangrove in more landward positions. Now, if you guys go to Australia, where there are more species of mangroves, the zonation is way, way, way more complex than that. And then the position is reversed from that in Florida, meaning that the seawater species is going to be the black mangrove. Okay, and that just has to do with the local geomorphology and also from different species that are present in Australia that we don't have here in Florida. And of course, even within Florida, there are also local variations. So when you're on a boat or whatever, what you see for the most part at the seaward is the red mangrove, right? So that is what I call zonation. So here, you see, this is the Florida case. So we have the red mangrove in the intertidal zone, and that is followed by the black mangrove, and then by the white mangrove. And this is again an example of those pure stands that the mangroves can form, and also of how the species are responding to very complex processes in tidal exchange and amplitude, but also in the geomorphology of every specific location. So it is beautiful to observe that because, in other parts of the world, you don't see that positioning of a species impacts as we see here. Okay, my last thing, perhaps the most important, is our relationship with mangroves and people. Not so long ago, I'm talking maybe in the 1960s and 1970s, mangroves were thought as complete wastelands, ecosystems that really didn't provide a lot of services. But today, that point of view, of course, has been completely revised. And we know now that they are incredibly productive and very, very important ecosystems. So the last part of my lecture is just trying to explain to you how important mangroves are and why do we say do they deserve to be preserved. So they have a historical problem. Everybody knows coral reefs, like the beautiful, colorful, all the fish, etc., etc. But mangroves, a lot of people associate, especially in the Americas, there are mosquitoes, they smell bad, they're swampy, they don't fulfill any role, they're transitional, let's get rid of them and build, I don't know, some marina or apartments or whatever. So that was the old thinking. And again, it's not that old. 40 years ago, most people thought of mangroves as sort of like, cheap lands that were just ripe for development. And that's what happened in Florida. We are exceeding number one. We have lost over 80% of our original mangrove cover, and most of it fell to development because people just didn't realize how important they were. But today, the thinking is completely different, and we know that they are one of the most highly productive ecological ecosystems in the world. alongside coral reefs, and in some cases more productive than tropical rainforests. So they are essential, and we don't have a lot of them. So look at this graphic, it's a little sad. So what you see there is a trend. That trend is not good. So globally, there is sort of like a reduction in mangrove area. And if you put that, from the 1980s when we started measuring global coverage of mangroves to 2005, which is kind of like the last year that we have global estimates, you see that the trend is downward. And on average, we're losing about 1% of mangrove coverage per year. This is on a global scale. So I'm not talking about Florida or it's globally. And this is preoccupying. If this trend continues, in roughly 1 century, we will not have no mangroves to speak of. So although the rate of destruction was higher in the 1970s and the early 80s, was about 3 to 4%, and now it's only 1%, we're still losing a lot of mangrove area. The culprits, I'm going to give you just two. The two most important ones are aquaculture and coastal development. There are many other ones, but those are number 1 and 2. Aquaculture and coastal development. And aquaculture basically is aquaculture for shrimp. And it's mostly in developing countries that is happening. So, those are the suspects of mangrove loss. Okay, so now why do we know that mangroves are important? Okay, for you guys, it's incredibly essential for all of us in Florida to have mangroves. They contribute to soil formation and help stabilize shorelines. One of the old myths related to mangroves was that they were capable of building land. Today we know that that is not true. They are not land builders, but they are land stabilizers. They stabilize the shorelines. And that fulfills an essential ecological role, especially in areas that are prone to storms, like Florida, right? We get hurricanes and whatever. Areas that have mangrove fringes tend to be way, way more protected than areas that don't have them. So it's a natural barrier against storms, and basically it's there for free. Imagine if we didn't have the mangroves, we would have to build dikes or any other type of infrastructure at a great, great cost. Imagine New Orleans, for instance, where a lot of the historical mangrove coverage was lost, and see the problems that they had with the storms, Katrina and onwards. So we know that they are very, very important at the coast. The Indian Ocean tsunami was a perfect example of the difference that mangroves made to the communities that were located behind them. The ones that had mangroves, very little destruction. The ones that didn't have mangroves, of course, the destruction was almost complete. Here, we see that in many areas, since we are now reevaluating the ecological role of mangroves, there are very, very extensive mangrove planting efforts. And again, if you have that, imagine all that root structure, the complexity, the wood is very hard. There is just a physical barrier that is going to protect you against winds and also against water, against hurricanes, typhoons, tsunamis, etc. Mangroves are there and provide a very important service in that particular respect. Okay. Another thing that people don't realize is that mangroves filter runoff. So mangrove soils and mangrove plants have a great capacity to trap pollutants and also keep them in their sediments. So if you have, say, outflows from Lake Okeechobee through the Everglades with all those fertilizers from the sugar plantations in Central Florida, okay, a lot of that doesn't reach the coral tract, the Florida Reef Tract, because mangroves are filtering some of that water. And that is quite essential. It allows for these ecosystems to exist because the mangroves and the mangrove soils are acting as sponges that are cleaning up that water. So that's another incredible ecological role. So corals, seagrass beds, and also shipping lanes are protected against siltation because mangrove forests are there at the coastline. So South Asia, where shipping lanes are so important, one of the main reasons that they keep those mangrove fringes is to protect those shipping lanes against excess sedimentation. And those sediments will, of course, kill the reefs. It will also kill seagrasses and all the cascading deleterious effects that come when these ecosystems are destroyed. So mangroves are providing that free service and allow for these ecosystems to exist. Other thing is that mangroves are a perfect place for many species: fish, crabs, oysters, birds, mammals, mollusks. All kinds of wildlife inhabit these ecosystems. They go there, they rest, they shelter against predators, they eat, and basically they use these areas sort of like places just to recharge. This is one example of one species who's dependent of mangrove for its existence. Is the scarlet ibis is the national bird of Trinidad and Tobago, and all mangrove protection in Trinidad and Tobago has been enacted to protect the nesting sites for the scarlet ibises. So, without mangroves, they wouldn't have that beautiful bird, which is their national bird. Okay, we have ibises here similar to this as well. Okay, so another thing is that mangroves produce large amount of detritus, and these are important to enhance the productivity of coastal waters. Since they are plants, there's a lot of nature fall. These are evergreens, right? They really don't go into dormancy like maple or whatever. So all that organic matter eventually dissolves and enters coastal waters. And all that organic matter is fertilizing the coastal oceans of the world. So mangroves contribute very large amounts of organic matter. This is a picture I took in Panama. The leaves are colonized by microorganisms, bacteria, viruses, and whatever, and then they become these tiny little nutritional pellets that are eaten by very tiny little fish, larvae of all kinds of marine life. So they are providing all that food to coastal waters. So they're quite important because of that. Most of the coastal fisheries around the world are dependent on mangroves for their existence. Most of those delicious fish that we like to eat depend on mangroves for their existence. Also, this is something that we've been talking about in the last 10 years or so, blue carbon. And that is that mangroves are reservoirs of carbon, and this is helping to diminish the negative effects of global climate change. So we have here, it's a very simple process. So like most plants, mangroves trap CO2, they sequester, that's called the process of sequestration. Those molecules enter into the actual structure of the tree, and then they store it. So insofar as the mangrove is alive, and they can do for hundreds of years, the carbon stays there within the tissues of the tree, and eventually, of course, they release it. So the importance of mangroves is that a very small mangrove tree can have roots that can go for dozens and dozens of feet away from the main trunk. So most of the biomass of a mangrove is not actually what you see, but what you don't see on the ground. And that is what is contributing to that particular sequestration. It's not really the canopy of the tree, it's the root system that is gigantic. So if you multiply that by millions and millions of trees, mangroves are one of the most effective mechanisms to sequester carbon from the atmosphere. And again, here you see the global distribution of blue carbon ecosystem. These are plants that can sequester carbon, and you see mangroves and salt marshes are the most important ones. Mangroves are in black, and also you have seagrasses. But of the three, mangroves are the most important just because the root system is gigantic, so they can sequester more carbon than just about any other plant. Also, mangroves, we don't use them a lot here in Florida, but if you guys travel around the world, they are used for just about everything. I call them the supermarkets of the developing world. They're fuel depots, a lot of medicine as there are from mangroves, charcoal, many uses. This is pictures I took in the Sundarbans in Bangladesh. And you see all the mangrove wood, and that enters markets in which it is sold or exchanged for other products. So this is like a never-ending parade of people whose livelihood depends on harvesting wood from mangrove trees. Also, they are very good at producing honey, for instance. And the mangrove palm, nipa, which we don't have in Florida, can be used to make baskets and all kinds of products. Clothing can also be made from this type of things. Charcoal is another important product that is extracted from mangrove, very popular in Japan. Supposedly it gives the food delicate flavor, etc., etc. So, these are living ecosystems that provide millions of people with their daily livelihood. So, quite important. Also, as I was saying before, they protect your coast. So, in the 1970 typhoon in Bangladesh, places that didn't have the mangrove fringe lost about 500,000 people to the effects of an ensuing tsunami. And of course, the most recent example was what we studied after the Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004, which was definitely demonstrated that mangroves provided between 60 and 75% more protection to communities that have them vis-a-vis those that did not. So, and we're trying to bring them back. This is pictures taken in Bali. So this is after the Indian Ocean tsunami. Governments realized that mangroves were important. They were cheaper to bring back than building infrastructure. And about 400 hectares of mangroves have been planted since, and it continues. It's also the case for the Persian Gulf, for Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, the Philippines, especially in Asia, the Madagascar. All of these places have incredibly proactive programs to establish mangroves in areas in which they were degraded in the 1950s, in the post-war years, 50s and 1960s. Again, the importance that they serve as nurseries of fish and other animals. And also many endangered species live within mangrove forests. So you see here, this is from Malaysia. If you go to those mangroves, here we don't see that, and so it's hard to comprehend, but a mangrove forest in Malaysia will have thousands of monkeys They are very nasty, they throw things at you. Sometimes they jump on you when you are doing your research, whatever. So males can be quite territorial. And this one is in Florida, spoonbills. And this one is one of my most favorite pictures. That's a mangrove tiger in the Sundarbans in Bangladesh. Funny stories, these things eat the leaves of the mangroves, which are very high in salt, and they kind of like go a little crazy, and on occasion they eat people. So they go into the villages, and I mean, nothing funny about that, but it's because of the high salt content in their diet. Scientists believe that it's affecting their neurological circuits, and it kind of like makes them a little mad, and then they just go into these hunting expeditions in which, unfortunately, humans are well, humans and other things, they eat monkeys and whatever, but it's because of they live within mangrove ecosystems. So, another thing is they're beautiful. Many places use them for tourism, and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that come and visit Florida enjoy trekking or snorkeling or other recreational activities within mangrove forests. So here, 3 examples of places that use mangroves in their tourism packages. Of course, in Florida Keys, Panama, Trinidad and Tobago, as I was saying before, in Colombia. So they bring people to mangrove areas to enhance the appreciation that we should have to these ecosystems. I got this quote from the New York Times, 2008, and you see that basically they're describing a forest, and all those are canoes with tourists that are just visiting, mangrove areas. So the more we know about them, the more we appreciate them, the better likelihood they will have to survive into the future. So this is my last slide. So if you don't remember anything of what I said before, it's okay, but I want you to remember this. So I want to leave you with this, and it is important to recognize that we humans and mangroves are interconnected, we're interlinked, we cannot be dissociated. We have been part of the ecological structure of mangrove for millennia. And this component continues to decrease, so we're losing mangroves. The relative size of this component, which is humans, continues to increase. So we have kind of like a competition for the same location. We also want to be near the coast. We want to enjoy the view to the ocean. We want to build ports and airports and hotels and marinas and golf courses. So we are exerting pressure upon this component that unfortunately continues to decrease. And as a result of that interaction, whatever is surrounding the mangrove ecosystems is also decreasing. So when we destroy mangroves to build a port or whatever, we're not only destroying the mangroves, we're destroying the thousands of species that depend upon them for their survival. So increasing, and as a result of that, all this component is also decreasing. So I hope you guys, gain a new appreciation for mangroves, and love your mangroves and protect your mangroves. They are really, really important and essential for our survival. So with that, thank you so much for your attention.
If we assume that there will be sea level rise, are the mangroves and any particular species capable of adapting to that?
Well, there is sea level rise. We see it here. we are in peak season to see some high tide inundations. Okay, so this is what happens, and that is incredibly interesting and question, and I'm very, very happy that it was. So it depends on what's, what's there at the end of the forest. If there is an area to expand, mangroves will accommodate and migrate landward. That is happening in the Everglades. Now, yeah, in the Everglades, it's happening, yeah. In North Florida, it's also happening. So if you have an area that they can colonize, they will adapt to sea level rise. Now, if there is a barrier, then the situation is a little different.
What about if you have sedimentation also though? You
Well,
still need to migrate inland?
They can, yes. In many areas, there is a very nice sort of like juggling game within rates of sedimentation and mangrove accretion. Basically, the mangroves are helping the process of sedimentation, and the sea level is not really increasing at a particular point. And we can see this, for instance, in northern South America. Now, other areas are disappearing because as the sea level increases, the mangroves cannot migrate landward. They don't have any space to move, and then of course they will disappear. So every situation is different. Rob, any more question?
I just wanted to clarify, make sure I understood something earlier. You were saying that tigers in the Sunderbans were getting high on mangrove leaves and eating
No,
mussels?
they eat mangrove leaves, and the salt contents of the leaves is very high. So scientists believe that this is bad for the neural activity of the tigers, and it's actually making them sort of like a little crazy. And they exhibit behaviors that they would not naturally exhibit when they are eating too much of these salty leaves, mostly Fabicelia marina. So it's not the typical diet, but sometimes because there is famine or what have you, they eat these leaves and then they go a little crazy. It's still an area of research, it has not been proven.
Is this like a more recent phenomenon, or?
Well, it has been observed recently. Maybe it's been happening for a while, but people didn't really report it. But now, since we have more contact between people and the tigers, there are more and more reports of this, like, this tiger was acting crazy. And these are people that are used to inhabiting or seeing the tigers in their natural habitat. So,
Is there any mangroves that are going extinct, like any species?
not extinct, but some species are rare. So for instance, not in Florida, but say if you go to Central and South America, there is a species of mangrove called Peliciera rhizophore that is only restricted to a few bays around the world. So the IUCN Red List considers that a threat to the species. It's not in an immediate danger, but it's not widely distributed, say, as the red mangrove of Florida, which is like all over the place. So it's only very few places in which you have it.
You were talking about the roots that grow up to try to stay above the water.
Yeah.
I've noticed mangroves here, they drop some type of, it looks like they're dropping roots.
Yes.
Yeah. What is that? They drop from the trees, and it
Yes.
looks like they hang down.
Wow, that's an incredibly acute and interesting observation. So that was actually discovered here in Florida. So they are also pneumatophores, but they are geotrophically positive, and they were described for the first time here in Florida. And what happens is that the soil in that particular location is so anoxic, there is no oxygen whatsoever, that the normal root system of the tree cannot cope. And as a result of that, the tree is sort of like sending this desperate strategy, and is producing those pneumatophores that are actually growing on the opposite direction. So it's an indication of stress, extreme stress in that particular location. That's super interesting that you actually have noticed that. Yes. Questions? No? Well, thank you guys again.
Thank you.